So my hair is not behaving today. I'm gonna try not to play with my hair, but it's kind of annoying. Anyways, I wanted to ask you a question. So obviously you see that I'm wearing my Italia jacket. You know, I know they're not at the World Cup, so don't even come at me with that. I already know. But I am always going to be Team Azzurri, okay? Anyways, how do you deal? Those of you whose parents are from different countries, you have multi-nationalities, ethnicities, whatever you want to call it. Because for me, nationality is just the country where you reside in. It has nothing to do with your ancestral background, in my opinion. It's like, you know, you can be born in a country and have that nationality, but your ancestral background is not of that country. You know what I mean? So anyways, I'm over here trying to teach people things. Anyway, yeah, so your ancestral background, how do you choose if you have, let's say you are, I don't know, German and Norwegian and Swedish and Mexican and you know, it's possible that you are just, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are mixed with many different, like my ancestral background. Like, you know, my dad is 100% Italian in the easy term, right? Because if you look at DNA, he's not just Italian. His family, because they're from the north, they have a mixture of many other different lands, but mostly right there, you know, northern Italy, Veneto, Austria, Switzerland, Dutch, you know, French, a little bit Baltic, Polish, Belarusian, you know, those, you know, things right there, nationalities. And then you look at my mom and, you know, it's Mexican, so native indigenous of Mexico. And then you have Spanish and Portuguese. And I don't know if there was like a little tiny little 1% of Moroccan or something, you know, like that, like a little bit Arabic, which is very normal because, you know, of the conquest and all the blending and oh my god, my hair is really annoying me. So, you know, you got that. So if you really want to zoom out and be like, okay, it's just Italian and Mexican, and then there's Spanish, because my mom has a lot of Spanish grandparents. So yeah, it's like, okay, then I'm looking at 3 main countries, and for me, I've always been drawn to my Italian side. It's my last name. It's the only last name I have. I don't have my mom's last name. And I think that that's also not by mistake. I last year spoke about our name and how our name is actually quite spiritual, and there's a very strong connection to our soul purpose. There is numerology tied to our name. There is a spiritual contract tied to our name, our first and our last name. And I think those of you who only have their dad's last name, it's not by mistake. Obviously, I think almost all the countries in the world, use both the mom and the dad. But in the US, it's just the dad's last name. And that is, you know, what was given to me. So I've always, well, not always, but I don't want to make this story super long. When I was a little girl, I got bullied. I got made fun of. My last name, they used to call me, you know, names because they couldn't pronounce my name. And I went to a school where it was just, you know, African Americans, like, you know, and Latinos, you know. So they all had English and Spanish last names. I was the only, you know, kid in that school with an Italian last name, and my last name sounds a little funny, so they used to make fun of me. And so I used to hate my last name. I actually wanted to have my mom's last name because it just sounded more normal to me. I was like, everyone has Spanish last names. Everyone has names that sound normal. Why do I have to have such a strange and funny last name that everyone makes fun of? If I got an award at school, like if I had to go up on the podium for whatever reason, they said, oh, Mayra Piloni, I would be embarrassed. I would cringe only because kids would make fun of my last name because they couldn't pronounce it and it just sounded like baloney. You know? It is what it is. I mean, it's haha, it's funny. But when you're a kid and you're growing up and you're, you know, really young, like, especially because I didn't start speaking English till about 8, I think. My brother's wife taught me English. When I started school, I was doing bilingual, you know, even though my household is trilingual, it's not bilingual. Well, yeah, never mind. Anyway, well, technically bilingual. And I say bilingual because my parents don't speak English. Okay, so when I was growing up, it was just Italiano, Español. Okay, so then I go to school and I'm listening to people speak in Spanish and English. Again, I went to a school, there was a lot of Latin kids. So there was a lot of Spanish teachers and bilingual classes, and that kind of messed me up because I'm already being raised in a house where they only speak Spanish and Italian and they don't speak English. So then I go to school where they're speaking English and Spanish, and I got really confused. So anyway, there's that. And then I have this last name, Piloni, that nobody can pronounce and that, you know, sounds really funny. And I'm getting distracted because there's like dogs and babies passing by. Anyway, so yeah, so when I was very young, I actually didn't embrace my background like I do now. This was like a gradual process as I got older and older and older, and I just resonated more with my dad's family and my dad whole ancestral line, and I noticed it even in my personality, in my looks, in the way that I am. Like literally everything about me is more Piloni. And again, it is my last name. I don't have my mother's last name. Even though when I was younger, and I'm telling you the story about how I was really embarrassed about my name because everyone fucking bullied me and called me, you know, names that I'm not gonna repeat on here. But they used to say really horrible things. And so it made me hate my last name until actually the 2nd grade. We were learning actually about Michelangelo, the painter. And we were doing this art thing where we had to sit underneath our desks and paint, you know, like he painted, you know what I mean? And so I remember we were doing this in class one day, and the teacher was reading this book about Michelangelo and art and Italian art and Renaissance and stuff like that. Anyway, she's like, oh my God, isn't your last name Italian? And I'm like, I don't know. I had no idea, okay? Because my dad's family immigrated from from Italy to Mexico. There was like, I don't want to make the story too long, but there was like some flood that happened that, you know, ruined the crops, and there was like a crisis, and they had to basically leave their lands. They were given the country, the president of Mexico basically said that they could come to the country and that they would give them, you know, everything that they needed to start again and be more prosperous. And anyway, it's a long story. I'll have to maybe one day share that on a separate video. So because of that, you know, my dad also speaks Spanish, and because he was born in Mexico, even though his parents are Italian, I don't know, it just didn't dawn on me. I didn't understand. I was very young, and you know, I don't know, like I'm sure my parents talked about it, but it didn't register in my brain. So I was confused. I think I don't know if I went home and I asked my parents that if my last name was Italian, and that's probably when I understood that, you know, my dad's family are Italian. Like I always heard the Italian language and I heard the dialect and I would speak it, but for some reason it just felt natural, normal to me. And then I spoke my mom's language, and so I don't know why. I'm trying to think back at what I thought as a little girl, and I don't know why. I just like, oh, I guess in Mexico they speak two languages. I don't know, you know what I mean? Because we used to go visit my nono in Mexico all the time. Basically, there's this town in Puebla that are all Italians, all of them. It was a 100% full Italian immigrants only town. So, and then I knew my mom's side was Mexican and Spanish. So I don't know. So when that question was brought up to me, it was like, oh, like this is interesting. You know, I didn't know. And I think it was actually in that pivotal moment that I started to love and appreciate my last name, because that's when I started to like, oh, I have a last name that's connected to famous artists. Like, I was like, oh, I had no idea this side of me. You know what I mean? I didn't understand. So gradually I started to like my last name, but I did revolt against it for many years. Like every time there was something I was doing, whether it was an extracurricular activity or, you know, for Catholics, you have to go to your church classes, whatever, the first communion classes, and they would say, oh, Mayra Piloni, and I was in a room full of Latinos, I would get embarrassed because I'm like, oh, why is it only me? Why am I the only one with a strange last name? Why is it that nobody else has a strange last name? Actually, it wasn't until I was about 13 maybe that I switched to a different school, and I think that everything was divinely guided by the divine. It was as if the divine said, it is time, Mayra, for you to go to a different school and experience being with kids that are just like you. And I was in a school full of kids with Italian last names. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not strange anymore. Like, I'm not weird anymore. People have funny last names like me. Oh my God. And I feel like that was almost like the beginning. Like, because after I went to that school and I was surrounded by all these amazing kids that I resonated with, that felt like me, and I was able to have a really good time at that school. I went there only for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. And then from there, I went to a Catholic private high school, which was also surrounded by a lot of people with, you know, very international last names. Not just Italian, but, you know, like Polish or, you know, German, you know, all sorts of last names, you know, African last names or Arabic last names or Spanish, English, of course, you know, Romanian, you know, all sorts of, you know, last names. And because it's such a famous school, and there was kids from all over the place, not just from my town or my area. So that was, I guess, the beginning. And then obviously towards high school, I felt very proud. I felt very proud to be a Piloni. And then I started to just, again, realize that I had so much of my dad's family. Like, again, the way that I am, the way that I dress, the way that I talk, the way that my whole personality is very much my dad's family. You know, and I think that, let's say you have multiple kids, right? You have maybe, I don't know, 3, 4 kids, 5 kids, regardless of whether it's with the same dad. They're all gonna be different. They're all gonna have more, like one kid's gonna embrace one side more and the other kid's gonna embrace the other side more. Like, I'm someone who has 5 half brothers. 3 of them are Italian and then the other two are, you know, Spanish Mexican. And it's just funny to see who gravitates towards what, you know, towards the mother's side or the father's side, or who has more DNA of what. We're all very different, even if we are all siblings, or, you know, even those that have the same mom and dad. You know, it's just very interesting. But so let's say maybe in the future I have a child who's gonna have my main three, you know, without getting to all the others, the main three that I have. And then their dad, let's say their dad has two different ones, two different countries. That's gonna be, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how my children are gonna do it. Who they're gonna gravitate towards, who their soul or their DNA is more like. Because you can have, let's say you have 3 kids with the same person. That does not mean that those 3 kids are gonna have the same type of DNA. One child could have more Italian than the other child. Maybe the other child has more German or more Norwegian. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting. And then, you know, think about it. And then, you know, as I went to university, which I went to university in LA, and then I went to, you know, Paris, and then I went to London. I just been this international person, and I've been around a lot of international people, and I've had a lot of international friends. And of course, throughout this experience and life experience I've had, of course I embrace my last name even more because I've done fashion as my background. Then of course, even more so, I was meant to have this last name. You know, I was meant to really embrace this last name and have this last name and bring it to the fame or the popularity that it deserves and the golden, you know, that it deserves. But it was already written. I believe that if you, and I'm gonna have to make maybe a separate video on names. If you look at your name, you know, it's very much tied to your purpose. You know, if you're meant to be famous, if you have placements in the 5th house, in the 10th house, maybe even the 2nd house, and you're meant to be famous or world known, your name is tied to that. It very much is. Even if you're not meant to be famous, even if you're just meant to be very well known for whatever it is that you do, you know, your name is tied to that. Your name is special and specific to that purpose. I'm gonna have to talk about this definitely a lot more, but it's just a message that kind of came to me, you know, today. I don't know, because I'm like, it's the World Cup. Obviously, Italia didn't go. I'm not even gonna get into that little subject. And don't come at me in the comments. I know my team didn't make it. But I still support them. They are still my team. I'm still proud, you know. And of course, I support México y España. Claro, 100%. They are part of me as well. I definitely support them. But like, as you already, if you got to the end of this video, as you already heard me say, this is something that I've just been, it's part of me. It's part of my nature. And I wonder, and I ask you, if you're someone like me that has multinationalities, you know, how do you feel about it? How do you choose? Who do you represent with the most? Do you represent with all of them? Do you represent with just one? You know, because I've seen this in multiple people who are of multi-nationalities, and I feel like almost all of them, the ones that I know, are drawn to one. They're not drawn to all of them, you know. Even I have cousins that are multi, you know, one is Mexican and half Filipino, one's, you know, Mexican and has German. I have a lot of Italian cousins as well who are also Italian and Mexican, or Italian and German, or Italian and, you know, Scandinavian. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and there's always that one side that seems to be a little bit more powerful. So I don't know, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I really wanted to share, talk about it, you know. And yeah, it's a topic. Gosh, I'm really not. I don't feel you know, presentable today, but whatever. Anyway, I'm not gonna edit this out. I'm gonna leave it because if you, well, you'll get to know me as I make more videos. I'm someone that likes to be very authentic and very genuine, and I don't like to cut out things or be filtering things out or editing too much. I like to really show up real because I think we need that. We need more authenticity on YouTube and social media. Enough with the bullshit, you know. And yeah, anyway, alla prossima y un bacio. Mwah.